Are live.
Nice. Good
So
start. It's a good start.
let's double check here just to make sure. Flyover.
Not going to make the same mistake I did a couple weeks ago. Keep my heater on with that background noise on my end.
Yeah, I work. Yeah, we're live. I see us live. So
Nice. We'll just be serenaded by the frogs.
yeah, and I'll remember to mute myself. So
I think it's awesome, personally.
all right. So let's do it. Let's get it started.
Welcome, everybody, to Flyover Footy. I am not Phil, so this might be a little interesting. My name is Matt Baker. I'm here with Santiago Beltran, and we're going to have a little bit of a different Flyover Footy for you tonight. It's going to be kind of a conversation, but we have some big things to talk about, so we're really excited. Before we dive into it all, Santi, how's it going?
Doing great, Matt. I'm. This is one of like around this time of the year, especially a day like today when it's really cold in St. Louis. I'm glad that I'm here in Puerto Rico during this time of the year. So enjoying some warm weather. Doing great.
Yeah, definitely jealous on a day like today when we're recording. It's day one of the freeze, the deep freeze in St. Louis. I think I saw the temperature is -2 outside right now.
Oh
We've
my
got some
God,
thunder snow happening. I
that's
I,
crazy.
I am
I don't miss St. Louis on days like this.
no, and it's kind of funny because I saw some of the MLS guys who were in town for the Super Draft tweeting Andrew Wiebe, just hoping he could get out of town.
I
Because you could
saw
see the
that.
line of storms coming through, and I think he made it back to KC, so that's nice. So everybody kind of went their own separate ways after the Super Draft, got home safe and sound, and we got through the festivities. We had the Steve's hot dog thing on Monday. We had the schedule release on Tuesday, Wednesday the Super Draft, and then everything just kind of shut down, froze. Everybody's hunkering down, and you're off in the promised land in comparison.
But lots of things happening this week for St. Louis City SC.
It is. It is. We have. I'm kind of curious how long our show's going to go. Usually we go, I don't know, an hour, 15, hour and a half when we're talking about some of these big things. But with just you and me, you never know how a conversation with us is really going to go. But we do have a lot of stuff to cover. So obviously, we're going to hit deep on the schedule. But I think we're going to start by going over some things with the draft. So looking at kind of an overview of the draft, the specifics for St. Louis City, and then kind of diving in deep into what it all means, putting all the pieces together that we have right now as we go into what we assume is a holiday break, and we have two new players to talk about. So I don't know. Let's kick it off with the overview of the draft. Let's set the stage a little bit on where we were going into the Super Draft. So going into the Super Draft, Lutz has said a few times in some interviews we had 21 players. We had basically our starting lineup. We had some depth questions, but we had a lot of puzzle pieces in place. And so in the draft, as the expansion team, of course, we get the first round pick. We also had the 30th overall pick and the 59th overall pick. First pick in the second round, first pick in the third round. We had a lot of speculation. I think if you listen to our last show, Santi, we went through, had to have been 5 or 6 different scenarios, one of which played out. And so I think the prevailing thought going into the draft is that because we have not so many areas of need, we would look more to the best available off the board or the one who would fit our system the most, assuming we would even take that first spot. Because we did throw around some scenarios. We heard rumors that some teams were looking to move up. Not necessarily St. Louis needed to move down, but some other teams we would be willing to entertain. And we tossed around some ideas earlier on that were kind of crazy, but not too crazy in comparison. The last show we talked about Colorado, we talked about San Jose, a couple 100,000 in GAM, a player, an international slot. But I think what we got was a little more than we envisioned for GAM. And my understanding is that it was really driven by Charlotte FC. So going into the draft a few minutes before, we were expecting, and we were in the Super Draft room. Stu was, we were with some of the supporters, some of the fans, and we were seeing what was happening. And then phones started going off, reports started breaking. It was happening live while they were doing the pre-show. Just a few minutes. I think Lutz might have even been in the room with us, waiting to go on air to announce what was happening with the first pick. And then the news was kind of permeating through the room that St. Louis City had traded out of the first pick for Charlotte FC to step in. St. Louis City was getting 400,000 in GAM with another 50,000 conditional GAM for this pick. And at that point, it was a little bit of the air was let out of the room, I feel. So in the room, there was all the excitement. We had a couple drums going, waiting for that first pick, waiting to chant. And then there was a bit of deflation because you were wanting to cheer it. But there was
Right.
also a lot of anxiety, a lot of interest on, is this a good deal? Is it a bad deal? Like, what are they going to do with the pick? What does this mean for Generation Adidas? All of that. So that was kind of what the room was like there. What did you feel when you first heard about the trade?
Well, it's interesting that you guys were there and you guys kind of saw what was going on. But yeah, I saw it on social media. Obviously, I think it was the the guy that usually comes up with these rumors, Tom Bogert.
Tom Bogert.
Um, so I saw a tweet and I was like, oh wow, this is a surprise. And when it said $400,000 and 50 conditional, I was like, wow, this looks like a great deal. And we have talked about it a little bit on the previous show and also on our chat. St. Louis has been doing a lot of things differently, and the system is a different system. And just thinking about, okay, they may not go for the best player available. They are probably going for the best player that fits their system, and that
Mm-hmm.
player may not be in the top five. So when I saw that, I was like, well, yeah, I guess this is what they are doing. They already know the guy they want, and knowing what the other teams need, they feel like that guy is not gonna go in the top five, and they are gonna, I guess, risk it and still see if their guy is available. If not, teams always have like a number two, a number three. So to me, it makes sense, and it was a really good amount of money. You usually don't see these high amounts of GAM
Record
in.
breaking GAM for a super draft trade.
So I was like, okay, and I don't know. I know these guys always do things behind the scenes, and the fact that after the pick was announced or the trade was announced, I remember if it was like in between or after. There was an interview with Bradley Carnell, and he was asked about the center mid position and that was a hole, and he said, "Yeah, we know that, and we're working on that, and looks like we may announce something soon." So at that point, everything has started to make sense. It was like,
Yep.
well, if that center mid position looks like it's already taken care of, and the team may already know what guy they want to pick on the draft, and it's not going to be number one, makes sense to get some money that you
Right.
can use later for that center mid or for other things that the team may need during the season.
Which I don't necessarily want to say we called it, but that is for sure one of the scenarios that we threw out there is trading out of the spot to accumulate GAM for a position of need. We knew that center defensive mid was a position of need going into the draft. We also knew that there weren't very many players, if any, that really fit the mold for somebody you can slot in right away. Definitely not somebody you can slot in right away, but even you can develop throughout the year in the Edu Leuven kind of mold, the 6 foot, 6'1", 200-pound kind of like truck in the middle of the field who can be part of the double pivot, who can really throw his weight around and help on the defensive side as well. So when you have that position of need, you have all of these things that you can come away from the draft. That was obviously something that we were looking to, and I couldn't be happier with what we ended up in that particular trade. What I thought was interesting though is hearing some of the quotes afterwards and trying to play Monday morning quarterback or Sunday morning keeper. I don't know what the soccer term is for that. A lot of the quotes we're seeing now really get to, this is the guy they wanted all along. Owen O'Malley, who they eventually selected, was the guy they wanted all along. So you try to backtrack on what's happening in the moment. And you always want to know how much of this is pre-planned, because in the expansion draft, totally different scenario. Most of it, if not all of it, was pre-planned. It was a it was a show to have like the 3 or 5 minute rounds, right? That was done ahead of time. This was a lot more draft day style. So the draft itself is vastly different from other sports, but if you try to piece together the timelines, here's how I kind of saw it playing out. And so let's get into the timeline a little bit of what happened. So they made the trade right before the draft to trade out. So they went from the first pick to the 20th pick, St. Louis City. 20th pick, you're not going to get a Generation Adidas player. Owen O'Malley is a Generation Adidas player. There's 11 of them in the draft. I don't care how many seniors are great. There was zero, like there's a not like a 1% chance, I would say, very very minuscule, because the last Generation Adidas player ended up going, I think, 18th or so, in that for, or no, it ended up going 16th.
Yeah,
No, no, wait,
16.
he went 22nd to Cincinnati. Sorry. So there was
Oh,
there was
wow.
one
Yeah.
after that. So but it was a
Yeah.
defender. It was a defender. We were never going to draft a defender. So at that point, you're in that 20th spot. The pickings are slim for Generation Adidas, and so they had Owen O'Malley on their minds this whole time. We found out, if that's true, and we don't have any reason to believe it's not, but assuming it's true, they trade out to the 20th. They have to know O'Malley's not going to be available, and so when they accepted the Charlotte trade, they had to know the guy we want, we're going to have to do something else to get back up here. So it is at what point in the next few picks did they actually identify Seattle, I think it was, at number 9 to make the deal with? Because also you're seeing you make the $450,000 deal with Charlotte. You don't want to lose most of that. You want to keep a majority of that, at least
Right.
half, I would say. So as we're drafting here in the first 10 rounds, you can go back and look. The value of the picks for GAM started to dwindle pretty quickly. There was 400,000 with 50 conditional for the first pick. There was, when you get down to the fourth pick, there was $250,000. The fifth pick was 225. The seventh pick was 175. And what we ended up trading Seattle for to get into the number 9 slot was 175 plus our third round pick. So I think somewhere between that, I don't know, third and sixth or seventh pick, that's when Lutz is probably reaching out to those next few teams. Maybe he calls up Seattle first, second, or third. But the other thing that goes along with that is 12 of the first 13 picks were traded. So Lutz is trying to make these moves. Lutz, Bradley, Vin, Hackworth, they're all trying to make these moves. And knowing that if they want their guy, they need to get back up into that top 10 realm quickly after trading out of it for the boatload of GAM. All of these other teams are making moves. You're getting New England, you're getting Vancouver, you're getting Real Salt Lake. All three of these teams traded up into the top 7 picks. And so, you're hoping that O'Malley's going to be available in the top 10 or 11 where he's projected to go. So it seems like that worked out pretty perfectly to where we didn't have to pay a premium. So we were right in line when it came to the value of GAM for those picks. So it seems like almost serendipitous that we were able to find that. And so then we land on our presumed number 1, Owen O'Malley. So I don't know, how much have you looked into Owen, and what do you think of that pick in and of itself?
So before we go into that, for a moment, I thought, okay, maybe we will wait until number 20th, and maybe we don't want a
Yeah.
Generation Adidas guy. But back to Owen O'Malley.
Well, on that point too, the Generation Adidas was a huge point of conversation, not just in that room, but all over, because we've talked beforehand. That's like a free roster slot for a very
Right.
top prospect. So it comes with cost control to the team, doesn't hit the salary cap. It comes with a guarantee for the player. It's a prospect who has been identified as top and a reason to pull him out of college. There's value in that type of a player. Knowing that we had one on the radar, and we were out of position to be able to get one. That was
Yeah.
a little unnerving, honestly, because you saw these scenarios of us trading out of one, but I kind of always assumed we would eventually end up in one of those, which we did. But it was
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
I can only imagine what it was like in the war room. It was pretty nerve wracking for fans.
Yeah, especially seeing all these teams moving up. But yeah, I got to
Yeah.
a point where I was like, well, maybe they don't like any of these 11 generation Adidas guys. Maybe none of them have what they think they will need for our system. So I was like, okay, let's wait. But but yeah, it's great that they were able to get back into that number nine position. Something interesting, and I don't, maybe there is nothing there, but St. Louis has done a few deals with Seattle in the
Yep.
last month or two. So they got one international spot from Seattle.
Before the
Then
expansion draft.
St. Louis acquired Sam Aderinam from Seattle, and now this number nine pick. So, and could be that that's just been, but maybe there is a good relationship between the two teams. Who knows? But just thinking about O'Malley, um, when we talk about like the top five, he wasn't one of the players we talked about in the previous podcast. But yeah, he was obviously a generation Adidas player, and the one thing that caught my attention was that he was part of the North Carolina FC Academy,
Mm-hmm.
former USL Championship team, and one of the things that I found was that when he was playing with the academy, he got to train with the first team too. So he has some kind of exposure to that professional environment,
High level, yeah.
which is good. And the other thing I read about him is that he can play in multiple positions, which is always a plus when you have a player with versatility. And the one that surprised me was look, hearing about the interviews Lutz gave and reading about them. He said that he may be a right back for St. Louis City SC. So we'll see. It will take obviously it will take a little bit for him to adapt to what the team wants. And the good thing is that you have City two. You also have an experienced right back in Jake Norwitzki,
Yep.
and so it's not like he has to learn the system and he will be put on the spot right away. There will be some time for him to learn and become an alternative there.
Yeah, and he's not undersized. You know, he's a midfielder, 6 foot, 150 pounds, 21 years old. He was a third year sophomore, so he was one who got an extra year of eligibility because of COVID. So he's had a turbulent but interesting time, and he was kind of a goal scorer too for Creighton. So he said it himself in interviews that he has really good pace and he has good finishing abilities. So his last year at Creighton, he had 8 goals, 5 assists in 23 games. That's nothing to shy away from, especially playing that kind of a position where you're not a forward, you're not necessarily being fed the ball, you're having to make things happen yourself. You're putting yourself in position outside of the box to be dangerous. So that we know is a skill needed from our fullbacks from what we saw at City too. So that hint and what we saw of Pedro and what we saw of DeRosa, that's kind of style that if you're going to slot him in as a right back, you would hope to see. Now, what I found interesting is he did. So we're recording this on Thursday night. He did an interview just this evening with Chris Kerber and Michelle Smallman from 101 ESPN. And one of the things that he had to say is, besides his great pace and finishing, is that in his words, Creighton played a lot of three center backs, and so you had more of a wing back role. So he likened his midfield role a lot of the time to that wing back position where he's out wide, pushing high up. And so we've often theorized that our fullbacks play a lot more as wing backs, despite the fact that
Hmm.
we have a two center back. To me, that fits pretty well, and it kind of changes the narrative of a goal scoring midfielder to what his strengths really might be.
Yeah, and I think the team had a plan. They had been scouting him, as you said. They mentioned this was their number one guy, so they have a lot of information on him, and I'm sure they see something that made them think that he will work at right back. So it's a good pick, and not only they got the guy they wanted, but at the end of the day, they got some additional GAM that they'll be able to use either for this center midfield that is coming or for something else. But I think it was a trading and then still getting the guy you want. Not even, oh, my number one was taken, now I have to go with plan B, my number two, which may still be really good, but they got the guy they wanted and they got some money, so I like that.
And Lutz didn't say he was worried about Sporting Kansas City, but I think that was the only unknown. So they kind of, you saw all those trades. That was the only spot in the top 13, that number
Yeah.
8 with SKC, that didn't get traded. And so you kind of have an idea of the teams trading up, what their area of need is, why they're trading up. So there's all those notions going through. That was the only unknown. The team that didn't make
Yeah.
a move, just sat pat. I don't think Sporting Kansas City was in the market for that type of a player.
Hmm.
But you never know how much they value the super draft. They might have just picked him knowing that we wanted him just to mess with us. I don't know how petty they might be
Yeah.
in that.
It's funny because one of the mock drafts I saw had O'Malley going to Sporting KC.
Right. There, yeah. That would have been interesting because at that point we had already traded and we were already sitting because I think it was announced a pick or two beforehand. So they obviously knew because they were, that was the only team they were waiting on. But I think as fans, we saw and we were hoping that whoever it ended up, we would have a good story to hear afterwards. And it wasn't, they poached our guy. And
Yeah.
along with that, to your point, what we ended up at that point with trades, we ended up with a net 225,000 of GAM with a potential for an extra 50 conditional, which depends on now Charlotte defender Hamadi Diop. So that's a name to remember. He could bring us in 50,000 additional GAM if he meets certain criteria, likely a minutes threshold. That's kind of usually what these are. It's if he gets a
Hmm.
certain amount of playing time. So that's the name to watch out for Charlotte for that. But at that point, we've come away with a minimum 225,000 in GAM. We came away with our absolute top target. I don't think if you're Lutz and company, you could be any happier with how that turned out. I'm sure there was celebrating going on in that war room once you pick 9. And then once you pick 9, we still had the 20th pick at that point. So that, as fans, you wonder, what are we going to do with this pick? How is it really going to, how we still have 2 extra picks. So the story is kind of the same. So we had our Generation Adidas player. We still have 2 more. I don't think it was until the 18th or 19th pick until it was announced, because when I was on with Jillian Sakovitz, it was around that 18th or 19th pick, and she had asked me who I want at pick 20. I think it was right before that. So that's when
Yeah.
I threw out John Klein's name. And truthfully, I had 0 other people on my radar. We had
That
talked
was
about
awesome.
we had talked about John Klein so much of, man, I hope he falls to us in the second or third round. Do you think it'd be jumping the gun if we got him in the second round, first pick at 30th? And, only name I could think of, aside from the fact that we just put so much hope into that, it
You
was
called it.
it was a bit surreal to have had that happen. I won't lie.
Yeah, that was amazing. When I was watching the stream and you called John Klein, I was like, in my mind, I was like, I think it's a little early. Maybe he
Yeah.
will go, maybe. Well, and we at that point we had already traded our third round pick, so I was like, maybe not. Maybe he won't fall in the cards for us to get him. But that was great, especially for you. That must have been a great moment. You were
Well,
there live and hearing the pick.
fast forward a second to when we actually picked Klein. The production was over. The stream was over. They ended at the end of the first round, and so that's why it took so long. They only streamed the first round. So I had been telling people, we're going to have to check the internet. We're going to have to go on the Twitters. We're going to have to go on MLSsoccer.com. We're going to have to follow Tom Bogert. We're going to have to figure it out for the rest of the draft.
Yeah.
So before we did that, we quickly found out that we had traded out of 20. So the only other pick that we were looking forward to live, we shipped out to Austin for another what was it, 50,000 in GAM with another 50,000 conditional. So the
Yeah.
minute I said John Klein, we didn't even have that opportunity for 20. It was taken away from us. But Austin, so real quick, this other name, Valentin Noel, midfielder from Austin, he's another one who, if he meets certain performance threshold and criteria, could net us another conditional 50,000 in GAM for this year. So that's another player to watch out for besides Diop at Charlotte. And then at that point, it was kind of just, you know, we don't have any more picks except for 30. And we just mentioned 30 seems a little early for Klein. 20 was
Hmm.
definitely early for Klein, but I could make an argument for 30 at that point, just who's off the board, right? Klein at one point was mocked in the first round.
Right.
a week or two ago. So I didn't see that as a reach, but we get to the end of the first round. We're watching the production get torn down. We're all getting ready to say goodbyes. And I start pulling up MLSsoccer.com just quickly, offhandedly, to see. Almost forgot that, oh wait, we have a pick that's about to happen. Maybe it's happening right now. I don't know. I don't think it's going to wait until the next day. But so I checked as people are leaving, and I almost screamed it out before I even had a chance to check myself. I screamed out some expletives, so I hope there weren't any kids around me, but screamed out, "Oh my God, we just drafted John Klein." And I just like looked around and just in stunned silence after that. And then I looked at Stu. I remember making eye contact with Stu, and I'm just like jumping up and down on his shoulders. And you can see that one picture that they took, like right in front of me. And it was like that another surreal moment where you've got like 4 or 5 of us around who are watching the draft, and we just start freaking out because what are the absolute odds that at that moment in time that we would just happen to pick the only remaining St. Louis person in the draft? It blew all of our minds, and it was a celebration at that point. So we didn't get to see it on the stream, but that was the cap to the night, and it was the ultimate celebration for us.
Yeah, that was awesome, man. That's it. Like that second round went really quickly. Like as you said,
It
like
did.
I was doing the same thing you just mentioned. I was like, okay, I'm gonna look at the website and maybe watch keep an eye on St. Louis CDSC Twitter because obviously they are next. So
Right.
that one probably be announced quickly. And yeah, when I refreshed the site, like I saw John Klein and Washington DC had already picked their second pick in the second round. So and just in a matter of 3 5 minutes, like 5 to 6 different picks populated. So it wasn't as slow and intense as the first round.
No, not saying that they intentionally put on a production for the first round, but that notion that they had 12 of the first 13 picks were trades, they went down to the wire for each one of those. And so they essentially reset the clock when they
Yeah,
traded the pick. So it kind of drug it out. The second round, there was 0 draft day picks or draft night picks. And then
yeah,
the third round went pretty quick, besides the number 1 overall, which Seattle took. And they took defender Blake Bowen. It doesn't really matter at this point. It's just the pick that Seattle took when that was ours. I don't think there were any draft day trades. Maybe 1 or 2 in the third round, but that went also very very quickly and of little consequence to us because once John Klein came to St. Louis, it was all done. St. Louis City doesn't really care anymore. But the thing about John Klein is, we know him, we love him. SLU graduating senior. He's 5'7", 140, 23 years old. He's got accolades, just a resume full of them, all conference A10. And he's the exciting guy. He's the playmaker, attacking midfielder from SLU. And the thing about him to me is that we could have gone the more traditional route of what I would say looking to a position of need potentially. We could have looked to a younger player. We could have looked to an international who maybe we would take a flyer on. But hearing the interviews with Lutz afterwards and hearing kind of the way he was describing kind of why we took John Klein, it was almost that homecoming story to where we had one more pick. We've talked, and he knows how full our roster is, how what our depth looks like. And on top of that, I think our academy really has to play into this. So in the past day or so, there have been a ton of conversations in the St. Louis soccer world about the lackluster performance that people see we have. So we traded away the first pick. We picked John Klein, and so knowing that he's good, but what does that really mean? And so part of it plays into the super draft itself and what it is used for, and especially from St. Louis City, because we're not a typical expansion team in the sense that we're still building our roster and using some of these picks and needing multiple picks to really flesh out the youth of our team. So we've had our academy up and running for a couple of years now, We're in our second full year of our academy. We've had City 2 play a full season, including some of our amateur players getting time there. So to me, we more stack up against some of these established teams like a Columbus, like a New York Red Bull, who have an academy system in place. They have a second team in place, so they have the pipeline ready. What you do, to me, looking at Nashville, for instance, Nashville, who had like 5 or 6 picks, I think they had a ton of picks in the second, third round. I think 2 and then maybe 3 in the third round. Yeah, 2 picks in the second round, 3 in the third round, in addition to their first. All that to say, we're not a team like that needs to stock up on youth flyers, because what you do when you do that is you take these 20 to 23-year-old players out of college. They have no relation to your system. They have no relation to St. Louis. They've gone through the college pipeline. Maybe they had an opportunity at an academy, maybe not. Maybe who knows what the circumstances were. But we also have all of these 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20-year-olds now with our U21 team who we've been developing for a year or two. So what does that say to me if we were to use some of these picks on players that more or less the academy kids should and could be stepping up into? Are you in that sense kind of saying our positions aren't strong in our academy here? We need to kind of have a gap filled at this this age and this trajectory that we have? Or are you saying I'm bringing in somebody who I think is going to be ready in the academy, but now this person is taking their spot, right? They're a draft pick. We're now spending money on. They have an MLS contract at this point. We're plopping you ahead of them in the depth chart in the
Right.
planning. What message does that send to your academy if you're willing to do that to your kind of players? So that's the other side of it, aside from the great homecoming story, is the notion of why we didn't have more players selected, why we didn't immediately select the number one overall, and how that plays into what he's been doing and preaching this entire time with our academy. I just find it fascinating that when you step back for a second and get out of the nitty gritty of the day it happens and kind of try to see the full picture, try to make it make sense, you come up with a picture of a sporting department that not only trusts in the players that they're developing, they trust in the system that they're implementing, but as a player in that system, you have to feel reinforced. You have to feel supported that you're being prioritized. The academy, the two team, the under 21s, you're being supported and trusted to be that pipeline as opposed to needing to leverage the super draft in a major way. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, that homecoming story for John Klein, I think that itself is also a message
Hmm.
for the academy players. Like St. Louis guy is gonna was picked on the draft by St. Louis City SC, and it's a message to the kids like, hey, in 2 3 years you could be John Klein and move to the first team, kind of setting that standard that you will have some St. Louis guys on the team. Is great, and he had a great career in college. He scored a lot of goals, lots of assists. Obviously, he will have to earn a roster spot, and maybe at the beginning we will see him more featuring with City 2, which is also good to have somebody with so many accomplishments at the college level. He could be one of the leaders for City 2 and for those academy players that will move to play for City 2.
I think City 2 needs to be kind of thought of too in this process. So we look at John Klein in particular, and you wonder where he's going to slot into. Also looking at O'Malley, because City 2 provides that opportunity to give them minutes right off the bat when you're still developing them, when you're still getting them used to the system. Sure, they're going to have a preseason. They know right now, December 22nd, when they're going to what system they're getting into. So they have an idea. Their preseason is going to start pretty quickly in January with training camp and then the Coachella Invitational. This to me just gives some more flexibility and almost like a breath of air to these guys, where they're wanting to prove themselves. They need to prove themselves because they want to make it to that first team as quickly as possible. They want to crack the starting 11. They want to crack the game day roster. But there's a place for them to start. And it's not with another team. You don't have to loan these guys anywhere else, like Jack Mayer was with Nashville when he first started. He had to go out to, what was it? Was it Charlotte, San Diego, one of those two?
Yeah. Uh,
And so
Both. I think he played some games with
sometime with both,
Charlotte
yeah.
and then San Diego. Yeah.
So that has a chance to. It didn't with Jack, thank God, but it has a chance to kind of set back your progress in the system if it's a very system focused, system specific team. Even though you're getting minutes, you're staying fresh. So Klein and O'Malley won't have this problem to begin with. O'Malley, I think, has the more clear path to the the game day roster to see more minutes in MLS, not just because the generation Adidas, but because he has there's a depth that he can slot into real quick. He might be competing with Akil Watts on the right side. Maybe one or both of them can play in the midfield a little bit if we have a need. So there's flexibility there. Whereas I think Klein he doesn't have his back up against the wall, but there's a crowded midfield, attacking midfield that he's stepping into,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't know how that's going to play out. So that's a conversation that we'll have when we see some preseason games. We know how they're lining up, who they're lining up where, because all of that flexibility up top that Klein's competing against, the Joaquinis, the Deneruns, Celio Pompeu, all the guys on the left hand side, Jensen. We don't know, and then we assume that Ostraka and Azeel Jackson are going to be that central mid, but attacking mid, but you never know. You won't know until you see it. So right now, I would project that Klein would be primarily City 2 with a potential to be signed to City 2 this year. We saw last year in the draft a significant number of players, especially in the second and third rounds, sign their contracts with the two teams. I would say at least half of the players in the second and third round that were selected ended up signing with the two team. So
Yeah.
that possibility exists also to give our roster a little flexibility. But either way, I think the long-term possibilities are there for Klein here, which is super exciting.
Yeah, and starting, even if he ends up going to City Two, that's not a bad place to start. You
No.
will know the system, and there will be times when he will get a chance to train with the first team. And one good example, and it's also another St. Louis University guy, Simon Becker. He went to Vancouver Whitecaps on the draft last year,
Yep.
and he or earlier this year, and he played with the MLS Next Pro team for most of the season. He had a couple of games that he played with the first team. Actually, I think it was the first game he played. He scored, and
Yeah.
then at the end of the season, he got a contract with the first team. So there are ways to get there, and as long as he's given the chance and proves that he has the potential, he will get there.
Betcher might be the perfect example. Taken in the middle of the first round, he signed his initial contract with Whitecaps 2. And then later in the
Mm-hmm.
season, as he proved himself and there was a need on the main roster, he got signed and called up and performed. So that, to me, is the ideal path for John Klein that I would love to see happen. So if he signs immediately and sees minutes with City 2, I wouldn't think anything of it. I would almost expect that. Don't be surprised. Don't be outraged. That's where these draft picks need to slot in, because otherwise in the past they'd be loaned out, they wouldn't be getting minutes, just a detriment, and it would further hamper their possibilities beyond the fact that teams have already been more focused on their academies and more focused on their international transfers than the super draft. So
Yeah.
this is nothing but good news, having two teams for these guys to play at, in-house. And
Yeah.
I think, go ahead.
Even for O'Malley, that we think from the two of them, he's the one
Oh
that has
yeah.
the better chances of seeing first team minutes. If he ends up playing as a right back, starting with City Two, will get him used to the system, get familiar with the position. So it's great to have that option to give some guys some minutes and get them used to the system. So we may see at the beginning some of O'Malley in City Two also.
And it's too early to look at the City 2 roster, but if you assume both of those players are going to start with City 2, you're looking right now at a framework of Dita Armstrong up top, Sergio Rivas, John Klein, and Juan Kuzain up front. And then our fullbacks are going to be Ezra Armstrong and Owen O'Malley, presumably.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's the opposite of a spine that we have built out
Right.
too. So they've always talked about building out the MLS spine. Well, we've got the opposite. We're building out the limbs before we get to the spine of City Two.
Yeah.
As funny as it would have it. I do think the Klein thing also speaks to a really cool notion that we've talked since City's inception that it is a shame that we're not able to capture all of these St. Louis players. And you touched on it that homegrown is a message to the academy, but I think it's a message to the community as much as it is anything as well. That he didn't have to. There were other ways that he could have filled a roster slot, but to go out and to bring a St. Louisan home, a SLU Gallagher alum. I consider him a St. Louisan as much as anything.
Yeah.
As his family has legacy at St. Louis University.
Right.
He is a St. Louisan as much as anybody else. So to have that player come through, to not have a direct MLS way to say he's ours. We want to homegrown him. We want to put a tag on him. We've identified his talent. To be using the only way possible to still bring a St. Louisan home, that part of the homecoming story in and of itself, both Klein's staying home and the club doing whatever it takes to keep a St. Louisan who they didn't have any other rights to, they didn't want to let slip through the cracks. That it brings together everything that we've wanted to see from this club, and so that is a heartwarming story. I'd love to see more of it if possible. So we know there's probably going to be some other St. Louisans from IU who are going to be in the draft, if nothing else, in the next few years. That would be a continuing cool story to happen where you're bringing in, you're capturing, you're closing up these gaps and going forward. I don't know if it's going to happen, but this was a really good message and a really good thing for the St. Louis soccer community to see.
Yeah, and I hope Klein does well and shows his value when he gets a chance with City too, and hopefully he will see minutes with the first team at some point too. So I know a lot of people in St. Louis will be rooting for him because it will be a
Yeah,
great St. Louis story. Like he did great things with SLU, and continuing that path with CDSC will be great.
absolutely. Anything else you want to touch on the draft? I think that wraps it up for St. Louis, right?
Yeah, so one thing when I was looking at Klein, something that caught my attention is that he spent some time with the Portland Timbers
Timbers.
U19 Academy.
Yeah.
I didn't know
Saw that.
that until today when I was looking at his profile.
Yeah, he was asked, I think, in one of the interviews about some MLS time that he had in some of those academies. So that was interesting. Clearly, not enough to have a homegrown tag.
Right.
We saw that conversation come up a few times where failed homegrowns on Elijah Paul and CJ Fodry from
Mm-hmm.
RSL and LA Galaxy, respectively. I guess Klein had the potential too if that timeline had worked out, but that was interesting to see. And it kind of goes to show the whole history of what we're talking about, where a lot of these kids at some point or another find themselves in an MLS academy and then go to college and then they're taken up. That's a path that exists and is a lot
Mm-hmm.
more common than I ever thought before I started looking into it. I always assumed that if you didn't crack an MLS academy, you went to college and then you were drafted in the SuperDraft. Before I really started getting into it the past few years, it never even it never crossed my mind that there would be, and we have an example right now, a few that have been in our academy and are going to college. But when you don't have that immediate direct, we're going to sign you to homegrown. We want to see you on. We're going to sign you to City Two. We won't. Instead, we want to see you develop a little bit more. We're encouraging you to go to college to get your degree. You've spent time with our academy. We're going to evaluate you when you come back. Like all of those options and just those different ways of going about it exist. And it's a lot to keep track of. It's a lot of opportunity for players, but it's a lot of different pathways to consider.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. We'll see stories like that with our own academy guys.
Yep.
Some maybe sign right away to homegrown contracts. Some will go to college and get drafted, hopefully by St. Louis, or at that point when they get that experience, St. Louis can sign them as homegrowns too. So
Exactly. Yep.
it'll be great to see those stories.
That'll be an interesting conversation. Some of these guys who we know are going to college, and seeing if we do tag them with homegrowns as opposed to letting them go into the draft. That's probably a few years away. Well, unless they get Generation Adidas contracts, you never know.
Right, but
That'll
yeah,
be a fun
yeah,
conversation.
but yeah, we'll hopefully 4 or 5 years down the road we'll be seeing those stories. I remember, oh yeah, I remember the first few games of the academy that this guy was in the inaugural roster. It'll be great to see those stories in a few years.
For sure. I think we touched on everything city related in the super draft. The one last closing thing. So, circling back to talking about how we performed, expectations people had going into it. Um, Travis Clark, I think he runs Top Drawer Soccer, one of the biggest minds in youth soccer, put out on MLSsoccer.com the 2023 draft grades, rated every club. There were 8 clubs who were in the A range, so A plus, A minus, and St. Louis City ended up with an A minus. Pretty cool, something to be proud of, which really speaks to the fact that you don't have to sign 3+ really key talents to be a success in the super draft because of
Yeah,
the existence of the academies and your youth and homegrown and international transfers, the global soccer market. This we did what we needed to do. I'm sure some gray hairs were formed in that war room in the middle of the first round there, but by taking Owen O'Malley at the number 9 and taking John Klein at the number 30, we got 400,000 in that first slot. So we walked away from the draft with 225 minimum general allocation money. And then let's real quick touch on, before we switch to the schedule, that comment that you teased earlier about Bradley Carnell. So he gave that interview after we picked Owen O'Malley, and he was asked about some of the allocation money plans by Jillian Sakovitz. And the answer he gave was that they do have somebody lined up. They can't announce it, they can't talk about it. It's in the works, but he asks the fans for patience. And the question was specifically framed around, because they had just gotten done talking about it on the air, the central defensive midfield position. So, knowing that we walked away with 225,000 in GAM minimum, we still have the need. We have the January transfer window yet to come. They have a guy apparently that we just don't know, can't talk about, still finalizing. How excited are you that that plan seems to be coming to fruition?
I love it. I love it. My only concern is when he asks for patience. Maybe it won't be in the January window. Maybe it will be in June, July. But still, I think that
Mm,
the team is following their plan, and they have recognized this is a position where they need more depth and a more experienced guy. But we'll see. We'll see what happens in the next few days. In that interview Lutz gave today in ESPN, he also teased that that Santa was around the corner. So maybe maybe we will get a center midfielder as a Christmas gift. But yeah, I think as Bradley Carnell said, just we have to be patient and wait. But this we have always said that this team works behind the scenes, and a lot of things are lined up and are not
yep.
announced until a month or even later. So maybe that guy, the team already knows who it is, and they're just working on the final details, and hopefully we'll get an announcement soon. But if it's not the January window, I wouldn't be disappointed if it comes in June, July, when the transfer window opens back up. And in the meantime, the team will figure out that position the best they can. But yeah, the team is working hard and very close to getting all the players they need, and just very exciting that we are almost 60 days to the beginning of the season against Austin FC.
Yeah, it's right around the corner. And I think this does, to me, put to bed the notion that Io Akinola is coming to St. Louis. That one rumor that was floating out there that one of the fake Tom Bogert accounts tried to confirm, that it almost got me. I was this close. If I had not been distracted, I probably would have quote tweeted that and set the world on fire and made it a joke of myself. But thankfully, life intervened, and that didn't happen. And I think with we're 3 deep up front, assuming we have a 1 center forward position we're going to play. That seems to be what we're going to go with potentially, especially as our roster slots are dwindling pretty quickly. We don't necessarily know who's on the senior, who's on the supplemental, even after these 2 picks, O'Malley and Klein. O'Malley will be on the supplemental as a Generation Adidas player. That's confirmed. He has a contract with MLS. That's a done deal. John Klein may end up on the City 2 roster to begin with, so that would give an extra roster slot. But as it is right now, with everybody announced and with Ben Lunt's backup goalkeeper heavy rumor, we of our 28 slots, we only have 3 left.
Three.
Four if Klein signs with City 2, and then we have potential for 2 homegrown specific slots as well. So you look at potentially a Caden Glover, Miguel Perez, Aaron Hurd, maybe even a Jackson Delkus. I don't know, but those kind of players who could sign homegrowns would be 29 and 30. So 3, maybe 4 slots are left, and that's it. Now, we also only have to sign 18 senior roster slots. So we could be at 1 central defensive mid and done for now with carrying a couple open slots into the season. That may be a scary proposition. I don't know that I'd be a huge fan, but Lutz is a big fan of versatility. We still have 2 international rosters or 2 international slots. He's talked about wanting to keep them. Maybe he keeps 1 or 2 roster slots open to do something with that as we go on. I don't know.
Yeah, and when I mentioned the June window, and I know you may not like that, but it could be very well that yeah, this is a guy that they already have lined up, has already agreed, but it
That's a lot of
won't be
patience.
won't be available
That's a lot
until
of patience.
that part of the season. And yeah, the team may struggle the first 3 4 months until that player comes. But if that's the
Or
case, the fact that there are multiple players that can play that position, the team will be able to manage. But we'll see what happens. Sorry, I interrupted
or
you. What were you
no,
going to say?
or Max Schneider sets the world on fire as our other defensive midfielder, and we run with it. Could happen.
That could happen too. Like you never know when you
Yep.
give a chance to a player like Max Snyder or Akil Watts. Sometimes it just takes for those type of players to get the chance to prove that they can do it, and maybe their chance will come early in the season, and they'll be able to hold that position until this new player comes in June, July, if that's the case.
Yeah, we have a few slots open. We have a lot of roster spend flexibility. So we have Tam, Gam. We're under the salary cap by quite a bit, if my math is correct. So either way, whatever bucket you're pulling from, we have a lot of flexibility going forward. We should be able to, if they want to, make some kind of a splash. So
So
knowing that, and knowing the time that we have, and the youth, the unknowns of the youth, all of that is all of that's just going to have to play out before we can really get firm beyond any speculation, I think.
and with that flexibility that you just mentioned, and I know a lot of people complain that we're not using the third DP, but it could be like a that type of DP player, but just
Yep.
using some of that flexibility we have with the salary
Yeah.
cap.
All of our U22s are available, young DPs available. We've got a lot of tools in our belt left to deploy. It'd be interesting to see where it goes.
Yeah. So let's talk about the schedule.
Yeah, let's pivot. So, before the Super Draft came out, the schedule was released on Tuesday. Let's hit the big ones. The season starts on February 25th, and St. Louis City will make their first appearance in the league at Austin FC Q2 Stadium at 7:30 p.m. on February 25th. I know flights are already being worked on. There will be there'll be ticketing for the away section to information to come from the club and supporters. So that'll be the first time we actually get to see City take the field at 7:30 p.m. Central. And then
Did
the big one on March 4th. March 4th is the home opener against, of all teams, Charlotte FC at 7:30 Central. So those are the first two that were kind of they weren't really announced first, but they were definitely the biggest draws. So let's talk about those two real quick before we get into the full schedule. What do you think about opening on the road, and what do you think about Charlotte as our first home match?
So opening on the road, for a new team, I think, just thinking it is opening weekend and all the attention is in opening weekend and all the teams having their first game of the season. I think it's the right thing to do. If you want to highlight a new team to the league, you wait until the second week. And opening against Austin FC, I think is also very special for St. Louis City SC. Like we have seen, we have seen on TV the environment that the fans put at Q2 Stadium, and how they celebrate the goals and how they get together before the game. It's a really great atmosphere. So it could be a preview for the CDSC players of what the environment will be at City Park for week 2.
Real quick on the environment, I had heard too that when Mastermind signed and came aboard as our music, I forget his official title, chief music, like
Yeah, I don't remember here.
he was sent to Austin FC. They said you got to go
Oh.
there. That's who we want to see. They've set the bar. There are others that are amazing, but Austin has set the bar now. We need to beat that. So you're totally right. That's going to be an interesting and exciting environment for especially City fans who they may not have been to any MLS stadium until we have a
Hmm.
team. So for that to be the first experience of a lot of our fans, that's pretty special too.
Yeah, and the other thing, not only the environment, but Austin FC did very well last season. So playing that first match against one of the top teams on the conference could also be a good measuring stick of where the team is at and how competitive it could be. So even if things don't go well that first match, it'll be good to measure ourselves against one of the top teams in the conference.
For sure. And I wonder if the expansion aspect played into the league's planning here, because it seems a little coincidental that we're
Yeah,
going to the expansion team from 2 years ago, and then we're welcoming last year's expansion team to open our stadium. So
yeah.
I get the home match the second week. I've been a big proponent of that as well. I love to see that. I want to see the opening week festivities play themselves out. I want to be hyped about that. You have the Rose Bowl El Trafico match happening. The focus is going to be there. We would be overshadowed, I feel, and it would
Yeah.
not give City Park its due. So the second week is where it should be. And it's a little different too, because most stadiums have not been ready to go for expansion teams to
Hmm.
begin with. Austin, Nashville, the FC Cincinnati played in their old stadium, but these brand new stadiums where you had to be on the road for months or weeks. We're the first opportunity to really see what is the league going to do to a team whose stadium is ready to go and to open it. And I think the second week was the right call. Now the team, I have beef with Charlotte. I think it's in good. I think it's in good nature. You know, there's a lot to make fun of for them. They did have a quality first year on the field last year. They really put it together once they got rid of the coach who knew his team was effed. But I and they're making some good moves. You know, they obviously traded with us for the super draft #1 pick. They have the defender that they wanted in Hamadi Diop. So, but it's interesting that they would throw them, who other than my beef and what I'm trying to drum up and create a rivalry, because why not? How else are you going to do it? There's really no inherent like larger St. Louis interest in Charlotte FC.
Hmm.
So I wonder what the thought aside from expansion was when you have teams sitting out there like Chicago and Nashville and Colorado. Like somebody
Yeah.
in the league has to be aware of the Colorado connection to St. Louis and how that could have been fun.
Yeah, and Charlotte is not. Charlotte plays in the Eastern Conference, so it's not even a rival in
Mm.
the same conference. So yeah, it was interesting, and it could be that element of, oh, okay, let's bring the the last two expansion teams, I guess, St. Louis City, or maybe the league got a hold of this Baker Derby, and they wanna make a thing out of it. You never know.
It's going to be interesting to welcome some of their fans in. That I'll just say I'm interested to see how that plays out.
Yeah, but
But
yeah, it'll be a good opponent for that opening game.
a
Because
winnable
yeah,
opponent too. A winnable opponent.
winnable too. Because yeah, other people may say, "Oh, I want a LAFC or I want one of the top teams," but yeah,
Yeah.
it's a game that could be winnable, and it's
There's a
always
lot of
good
different
to start with 3 points at home.
exactly. There are different angles you could look at. Is it do you want a more of a rival, a geographic rival, or somebody that you want to create that 4-hour drive rivalry with? Do you want to
Yeah,
make it somebody nationally known, like a Sounders, a Timbers, an LAFC, somebody who has that following and is a big name, so you could really tout it nationwide? Or do you want to be winnable? Because you really can't have all of those. And
right.
I mean, the more I think about it, the more I would prioritize a winnable matchup, which everybody's expecting Charlotte to be a little better than they were, missed the playoffs last year. But of all of the matchups that we've talked about that are in those other scenarios, this does seem like it could be winnable. But we won't really know how winnable we are as an opponent or as a team until we start to see some on field action. That's getting way ahead of ourselves there.
Yeah, yeah. The one I really wanted was the derby against Sporting KC, but obviously
Yeah.
that will not happen until rivalry week.
Yep.
Um, but May 20th will be that first game against Sporting KC. But yeah, I really wanted that one as the home opener, and I know some people did too. But obviously, the league likes to put these games in a specific week, which is fine too.
Yeah, so let's run through the schedule real quick. Everybody has it in their phones and computers, but let's just run through. We start with Austin FC, Charlotte FC at home, away at Portland on March 11th. We welcome San Jose Earthquakes on March 18th. We go to Real Salt Lake on the 25th. And then it runs through basically every week or every Saturday, Sunday, Wednesday. Minnesota, we welcome. We go to Seattle. We welcome FC Cincinnati. We go to Colorado. We welcome the Portland Timbers. We go to Dallas. We go to Chicago. Then Sporting KC, Vancouver Whitecaps at home, at LAFC for one of those rare late 9:30 games. Well, not as rare as I'd like. And then July kind of starts with Colorado Rapids coming here, going to LA Galaxy, going to Toronto. That stretch is going to be tough because of the travel. There's 4 days difference, July 4th and July 8th. And then we finish July on July 15th against Inter Miami. Now, might as well not get too far into will Messi play because it's already been announced he's verbally agreed to go back to PSG. But that was a fun couple of days.
Yeah, yeah, that was fun. People joking around like, "Oh, I'm gonna sell my tickets
Pay for
and
my
then
season tickets in this
pay for
one.
my season tickets." And then it was confirmed. It was announced that he had verbally committed to going back to PSG next year. So no Messi, no Inter Messi this
No,
year.
no Inter Messi.
Um,
But the
but
thing is, though, that Inter Miami match is the last match before the Leagues Cup break. So we don't know the dates for the Leagues Cup yet, but we know it's going to run sometime between July 16th and August 19th, which is what the
mhm.
gap is. Because on the MLS League schedule, pivoting back to that, our next game after Inter Miami on July 15th isn't until August 20th, another home game, the backside of that Austin home and away. And then we go to Orlando. FC Dallas comes home to us. And then a couple away games against Sporting Kansas City, Houston Dynamo. LAFC then comes to St. Louis. City goes to Minnesota United. And then we finish September with another third matchup against Sporting KC on September 30th, finishing off the 3 matches we get against SKC. October is we start October right after SKC, going to Vancouver. There's an international break, and then we welcome the Seattle Sounders on Decision Day, October 21st, to end the year. That's the only game that is to be determined as far as time, which is another interesting thing to this whole schedule. Is that if you notice, every single game is either at 7:30, 8:30, 9:30, or your occasional 6:30s if we're on the far East Coast, and there's one noon matchup against LA Galaxy in St. Louis. A byproduct of the Apple TV deal, right, Santi? So we talked about what Apple wanted to do with the schedule, standardize it to all Saturdays with the occasional Sundays and Wednesdays. And we have the 4th of July matchup on a Tuesday. I think that's the one other. The stat the club put out is that 13 of our games are at 7:30, 2 games are at 8:30, one is at noon, and then we have the earliest home match is going to be that noon game against Galaxy. The latest home match is going to be at 8:30 a couple times against SKC in Austin. The earliest away match is going to be 6:30 Central, and the latest away match is 9:30. The whole idea is that you have 26 of our games on Saturday. That's going to be your big block of schedule. When is MLS going to be on? It's Saturday. That's what they're going for. Is that they want to create this destination, known viewing, and you can promote it. You can create some content around it, including the Apple TV Whip Around show that's going to air the entirety of Saturday night, starting around 6 and going until 10 with the pre and post shows. And then you'll have studio shows in between all those for the broadcasts. But that to me is the big win of the Apple deal, is that we have standardized. So we don't have to worry or think, all right, we're going to play at 3 p.m. on this Sunday, and then next Saturday is a 5 p.m. game. There were blocks-ish, mostly when you're considering two-day NA broadcasts on Saturday. They had some pretty good time slots. But beyond that, ESPN, Fox, they just aired them whenever. And it was tough as a fan to know when MLS was on. This solves it. And as a ticket holder now, I think that helps out immensely because I can just basically say pretty much every Saturday, we're going to have to block or consider it. And then you can very specifically, intentionally know those 5 Wednesday matches, the 2 Sundays, and that 1 Tuesday on July 4th.
Yeah, obviously a lot of games are like late on Saturday, which is something some people didn't like because they want to go to the game with
Kids.
their kids and all of that. But yeah, I think people will adapt to that new schedule. But I like the consistency, as you said, like knowing okay, every Saturday around this time is when the team plays. It's easier for planning. The one thing some people don't like is even though you had like the game on Fox, the game on ABC, someone in ESPN, and at different times, like sometimes you could have games like from noon all the way to 9 p.m., 10 p.m., and you could watch 4 or 5 different games.
That was
Um,
neat. That was neat.
but I think having that consistency will help attracting more fans. And as soccer keeps growing in the US, like you will know, okay, it's always on Saturday. Like it's usually around, depending on where you are, like between 4 and 8 p.m. So I like that. And just this Apple deal will give more exposure to MLS worldwide.
Yeah, and that's the other interesting thing is we say that the standardizing it to Saturday nights for 80+% of the games will help draw fans in. And then there's the other argument of you're taking it off of TV and you're putting it behind a paywall of Apple TV. But as with anything, there's nuance to it. So there is, first of all, there is the deal with Fox Sports. ESPN is out, so they're no longer broadcasting for the first time since the league's inception. They did a whole goodbye thing on social media. Taylor Twellman thanked everyone, and it kind of going down with a ship type thing. You know, it's an honor to serve. And everybody who worked on and worked in front of the cameras, behind the cameras, did amazing with ESPN. The problem we always had were the production beyond the games. So there was a lack of focus on growing the sport beyond the block of 2 hours, maybe a pregame, but there wasn't that dedicated time like you saw with any of the other properties that ESPN had. That's why I personally wasn't heartbroken when ESPN bowed out. What Apple has the potential to do, besides the Fox Sports deal, so Fox Sports airing about 1 game a week, of which St. Louis City has 3. The Sporting Kansas City game on May 20th, the LA Galaxy game on June 11th, and the Austin game on August 20th. All home games
Home
will
games,
be
yeah.
will be on national television. So that's kind of cool to be able to spotlight City Park on Fox and FS1 for those 3 games. That big fan of that. The flip side of Apple is they're still planning on putting a certain number of games in front of the paywall. So you'll still need to turn on or tune into your Apple TV app, but you'll have the MLS season pass tile or something in the Apple TV app to
Hmm.
access everything, but they will keep some game of the weeks in front of the paywall. So you'll have access for free to at least an MLS match a week. I don't know how many they're actually going to be putting in front of the paywall. Some they're going to make available to just Apple TV Plus subscribers, so that if you have that $5 or $6 or whatever a month for Apple TV Plus, you get a few extra MLS games a week. And then everything is behind the MLS season pass. So they're giving kind of windows into pulling people in who maybe in the Apple TV ecosystem. It's obviously a draw to get more people into the Apple system as well as the MLS. It's clearly that partnership that's going on here. But I do think there is a little bit being blown up about putting everything behind the Apple paywall. Because if you wanted to watch most games now, in the years past, in the past few years, you would have had to tune into ESPN's app. ESPN Plus is where MLS lived. They lived, like I said, on ESPN and ABC sometimes, but it was difficult to know when. When you did know, you knew that you could sign up for ESPN Plus and you could get MLS. The win for that was the additional content that you could find. So MLS was a portion of it. Portion that I particularly think ESPN just had to say they had a certain number of content as opposed to spotlighting, which Apple will resolve. But it's not as big of a difference to me as what we had. And I think the standardizing the game times is the big win for the league going forward. City fans, I think, are stepping in at a really good time to be in this world, especially season ticket holders or ticket holders of any kind, as opposed to the world we were in where matches are all over the place. You do have that
Yeah.
one match or two matches a week, but you never know when it's going to be.
Yeah, I definitely like that consistency, and yeah, it's a new TV deal. But one thing I heard about Apple is that eventually there will be team specific content. So
Yes.
maybe not at the beginning, but eventually we'll see that available on Apple TV, and things like that you don't see right now.
Right.
Up to this point is something that you didn't see, so it'll be good to see team specific content. And obviously St. Louis City SC has been doing a great job creating content for the fans, but it'll be great to see some of that content or additional content on Apple TV down the road.
It's really going to reward putting together such a robust content team that the club decided to do when they have this as an available method to get their content out. And I think we're going to see personally a significant difference between what we have versus what some of the other teams will be creating on there. So the more creative, the more desired content, the better off we'll be. And City fans are going to love it, and I can't wait for that because that's something I just crave. So you see all these other in studio shows, and you want to see like news, and we turn to podcasts now to get info on the league, but it's going to be nice to flip on the TV and be able to see some of these in studios, some of the highlights, a lot more than the one weekly recap show that was on ESPN Plus before.
I'm looking forward to seeing that whip around show every
That'll be
Saturday.
cool.
That'll,
That'll be
that'd be
cool.
really cool.
So before we go, because I think that's about everything that we had. What I'm interested, Santi. What are you most excited about on the schedule? So I don't know if you have it pulled up there, but what I don't know, 3 to 5 games or so are you most excited about going to or seeing or knowing that St. Louis is going to be playing?
So yeah, I have a I have like 3 or 4 on the list. Obviously, the games against Sporting KC, just
Mm-hmm.
because that's the closest rival geographically, and eventually that could grow into a derby. That's one. Another one that I really like is September 20th against LAFC, just because
Yeah.
it is the reigning champion and has a lot of great players, and it's always great to play against the top teams in the league and see where you're at. And it's late in the season, and uh, hopefully St. Louis still has a chance to make the playoffs, and it could be one of those games that could be a must win for CDSC to stay
Oh yeah.
alive. So that's another one I like. Thinking about road games, the one that really caught my attention is the one against Nashville, just because it's also a good opportunity for fans to travel, and it's another stadium that you could see that had a great atmosphere, and it's a bigger soccer specific stadium than ours and than some of the ones that have been built recently. So it'll be good to
30,000.
see. It'll be good to see what they have out there in terms of environment. And Nashville has also been one of the more consistent teams in the last 2 years. So it'll be a great game too. What about you? What do you have circled on your calendar?
So Nashville, it was definitely one that I had circled. That's Father's Day weekend, and so I've already been talking to one of my friends who has season tickets around me, and we are planning to take the families there tentatively. So that's a big one, and obviously the stadium. Excited to do that. Also, I have family out in the Bay Area, so I was looking at June 24th at San Jose Earthquakes. That's not really a this matters. That's just an interesting one to me. The Sporting KC ones, obviously, love that we faced them 3 times. May 13th against Chicago Fire. Looking forward to going up to Soldier Field. I've never been to Soldier Field for any game, so I'm excited for that. And then I don't know. I was kind of annoyed with the July 4th game at LA Galaxy. I would have been pretty excited if we had a home July 4th game,
Oh yeah,
fireworks after. That would have been cool. But I'm kind of annoyed that we have a July 4th away game. That's going to mess up firework plans. The Tuesday, I don't know. That one irked me. It's Galaxy. I don't know. July 1st, though, before that one's going to be welcoming the Colorado Rapids for the first time.
oh yeah, that'd be a
That
good
one's going to
one
have a
too.
unique flair to it, so I'm excited to see that. We have typically had somewhat of like an antagonistic relationship with FC Cincinnati dating back to the USL days and the we crushed the league stuff. So I'm kind of excited for them to come on April 15th. And then September 23rd at Minnesota United. I haven't been to Allianz Field, and I'm excited to go there and see for the first time. My first experience there being watching City, and then obviously Decision Day. So we have a home game on Decision Day. That's cool. So we'll be in the
Yeah,
stands. We'll be checking phones. Hopefully, we'll be in playoff contention because what they do on Decision Day, for anyone listening, if you're still listening at this point, thank you. But if Decision Day, usually the reason is TBD. They always slot Western Conference teams playing later in the day, Eastern Conference earlier. Everyone plays at the same time, so you have all of that, um, the sweat and all of the interest in who's going to be making the playoffs, and no team is able to see the others before they finish their own game. So it's a lot like the Premier League does it. It's a lot like they have, but it's with conferences. So that's fun. So I'm excited for the Seattle Sounders to finish off the year, and every home game is going to be a party, but I'm most excited about those.
yeah, yeah. Seattle Sounders is also exciting for me
It'll be a tough game
because
though.
it will be, but not only that decision day game, but also one early in April. At least for me, it's interesting, exciting because Seattle Sounders before St. Louis had an MLS team. Seattle
Mhm.
Sounders was my MLS team. That was my
Ah,
first MLS game I went to, and I kind of became a fan and watched more MLS thanks to the environment I experienced at Lumenfield. They have a great
yeah.
atmosphere when they play at home, and I got some appreciation for Seattle. And I have a good friend in Seattle. She's not gonna like that I'm no longer gonna be a Seattle Sounders fan, but it'll be great to see St. Louis playing against Seattle Sounders. And as you said, hopefully it's a game that matters, that we still have a chance to make the playoffs. And imagine if it is one of those that whoever wins makes it, or both teams need a result. So yeah, decision day is always bring great stories, and hopefully St. Louis will still be in the running when that game comes to town in October.
Yeah, the only other interesting thing I note is we have very few back to back to like very few strings of games, home or
I
away.
noticed that.
So it's like two games home, 2 games away, I think is the max that we have, which doesn't really give time to, there's no home stretches. There's a game a week, but that was just notable to me that the travel schedule is kind of broken up that way. And there are some, for the most part, it seems like the away travels for the team is going to be fairly straightforward. Sporting KC, Houston Dynamo, FC Dallas, Chicago Fire. But then you have that one in July, Galaxy going from home to the Galaxy to Toronto in a span of 7 days.
Yeah,
That's a
coast to
lot of
coast. Yeah.
that. And then back home from Toronto, you get a week break before Inter Miami. That stretch in July, we're going to talk a lot about because it's going to be tough travel for the team.
Yeah, I will imagine that the team will probably go from LA to Toronto, but we'll see.
Hey, they've only got
'Cause,
4 days,
yeah,
so
it's only 4 days, so
yeah,
going back to St. Louis, I don't think makes any sense.
no, no. Well, I think that about covers it. Anything else you got, Santi?
No, no, that's all I have. Excited because we keep getting closer, and the roster is almost set. Maybe we'll get some news before Christmas or on Christmas. We'll see. We'll see what this team surprises us with.
I mean, that's the goal of recording this, right? So Lutz teased something for Christmas. We obviously know that things like to be broken once you do a podcast. So we're doing our part in recording this so that we can urge some breaking news and maybe a player signing or something fun on the field for Friday. If it doesn't happen, you can't blame us. But it was fun to see what happened this week. It was fun to have all this happen right before the holidays. And, hopefully everybody who's listening gets some good time for the holidays, family, friends, some relaxation. I'll try to do the same. Santi, you have fun in Puerto Rico with the frogs. I don't think we can hear the frogs, but they are there as always.
Yeah, no, and happy holidays to you, Matt, and stay warm.
I will try. It's a lot harder for me than it is for you, but I'll give it the old college try. That's all we have for Flyover Footy. Thanks for joining us. And if you're still with us, an hour 15 plus, God bless you. Thank you for doing that. And we've had fun this week. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, whatever you celebrate. We appreciate you. Thanks, and we'll talk to you later.
Merry Christmas.